Here's what's interesting. The characters are not the ones who are in suspense. We are the ones whose perceptions are being knocked about. And our perceptions as the audience in the secondary structure is being knocked about because there's stuff we don't know. It's not because the writer's doing exposition, it's because he's not doing exposition that all this feels so compelling. This week, we are going to be looking at Strange Darling by J.T. Mollner to explore a couple of related concepts. The difference between primary and secondary structure and how to think about that when you are building your screenplays. We are also going to be looking at a couple of images from Strange Darling. Now, I don't know, did J.T. Mollner know at the beginning of writing that this guy is a doomsdayer who doesn't think there's a tomorrow and that's why he's cooking this way? Or is that something that the butter and just saying yes to the butter actually led him to? I don't know if he knew at the beginning or if he discovered. But what I do know in my own writing is that when you start to see these specific images, doors of realization start to open and you start to realize what you are building. I want to actually start by talking about the very first image of the film. This was actually J.T. Mollner's inspiration for the whole movie. Kept on getting this image of this last girl running across the field towards camera. What he actually did was he looked closer at the image. And what he noticed was that there was a bandage attached to the ear of this woman. And he didn't know what the bandage meant yet. But what he did know was that bandage meant it was no longer a cliché. He was seeing something specific. When you are writing your own films, it is really important to exercise that visual part of your mind. And you can't exercise that part of your mind if you are scared. If you are so scared of writing something bad or cliche or a trope or a stereotype, if you're so afraid of putting the bad thing on the page that you don't allow yourself to actually see what you're seeing. When you see a trope, what you know is not that you're doing something wrong. What you know is that you're not fully seeing it yet. Because here's the magical thing about screenwriting. If you are willing to look closely, you can make anything fascinating. And the mistake we make is turning away from cliché rather than looking at it more deeply. One of my great mentors was Augusto Boal, who I got to study with only briefly, but who really changed my life. And Augusto said that all of life's problems actually come down to three problems. And as screenwriters, so many of life's problems, of our writing problems, also come back to the same three things. Not seeing what we're looking at. Rather, getting the sense of the image rather than the real image. Not hearing what we're listening to, right? Getting the sense of the dialogue rather than hearing how does this character say it slightly different than anybody else. And finally, not feeling what we experience, trying to manipulate our audience through a set of experiences, rather than actually having those experiences ourselves. You can solve these things by simply building the muscles that you need to actually look more deeply. In J.T. Mollner's case in Strange Darling, it was just the bandage over the woman's ear that we notice as she gets closer and closer and closer. I'm going to give you another example of this, where we are simply watching an old man cook breakfast. And what's he making? He's making eggs and pancakes. And this is another boring cliche image that a lesser writer, a lesser director might have run away from. But what J.T. Mollner does is he keeps looking. And he asks himself a really simple question. How does this guy make breakfast slightly different than anybody else? And what he sees is an entire stick of butter melting in the pan. The scene is so compelling. Next to that skillet is another skillet in which an incredibly greasy pile of sausage is cooking. See, he's just yes-anding that first image of the butter. And as it proceeds, the man makes pancakes in this deep well of grease, and then he starts making little sandwiches out of the pancakes. And then he pours an entire can full of pie filling onto the pancake, and then whipped cream, and then he puts a ton of maple syrup on top of that. And you can see all of this is just JT Mollner going, yes, if this is true, what else is true? If he's using a whole stick of butter, what else is he doing? Now, this brings us to the idea that I was talking about at the beginning, the idea of primary versus secondary structure. So we're going to do a quick definition. Primary structure is the way that the character experiences the movie. We're not setting anything up. We're not paying anything off. We're not establishing. We are simply connected to the character and going through the journey through our character's eyes. Now, the way we find primary structure is by doing something that can be a little scary at first. Just like looking at Cliché can be scary. The act of letting go of your need to control your script can be scary. The act of actually just saying yes to what do I see? And if this is true, what else is true? Secondary structure, on the other hand, is how you serve what you are building to the audience to create the greatest possible effect in them. Secondary structure is going to take time. But here's the good news. Primary structure is actually the more important structure. Learning how to build primary structure for your characters is going to give you the biggest possible change. Whereas it doesn't matter how good you get at secondary structure. It doesn't matter how beautiful your craft is if you aren't seeing, hearing, and feeling. I'm going to suggest to you that there's a process you can follow where you can actually learn to build primary structure first and then come back and very quickly start to ask yourself, okay, what does the audience need and how do I best serve this to the audience? Well, how does Strange Darling do that? We're told it's going to unfold in 6 chapters. And then instead of going to chapter 1, we go to chapter 3. Now, this is really interesting. From a primary structure point of view, the girl knows she's the serial killer. The guy knows she's a serial killer. The girl knows why he's hunting her, and the guy knows why he's hunting her. By the way, the girl's name is the lady, and the guy's name is the demon. They're named for the tropes, and the super titles even tell us the tropes. So we go to chapter 3, and we're like, what? What the director is doing is he's manipulating the audience's expectations to tell us a couple of different things. Number 1, you don't know where you are. You think this is going to unfold linearly, but it's not. Because he's playing at the beginning with a trope, with something that feels like it might be cliche. And this is the beginning of the script, and that's really dangerous. Because he happens to be a really great writer and a really great director. And this piece is really freaking good. But we're at the beginning. We don't necessarily trust him yet. And he's walking a razor's edge. Because this can very easily look like exploitative, like just another permutation of a serial killer trope. And so what he is doing by shifting the order on us is he's doing the exact same things he did with the bandage. He's finding that little specific thing about, this time instead of what he sees, about the way he serves it, that's going to say, yes, I know we're in a trope, but my trope is slightly different. The feeling that this gives you as an audience member is a feeling of being disconcerted, a feeling of maybe am I in the head of the killer, right? Am I seeing things in the disordered way that we imagine he is seeing it? We are actually experiencing this dislocation. And that's going to end up being really important because he's about to dislocate all of our expectations. And we have this wonderful framing question, are you a serial killer? Which is going to end up having much more important thematic answers than we expect. Because as we bounce back in time, we're going to see all this really terrifying stuff. A guy hunting a girl, saying only the words, "Here, kitty, kitty," shooting into different places he thinks she may be hiding, right? We're going to see this really terrifying, really extended chase sequence that is horrifying. And then we're going to cut back and we're going to see an earlier scene. I'm going to see that same guy. And he is playing such a nice guy in a car with a girl who's a little bit drunk and is deciding whether she wants to get laid tonight. And we are enjoying the irony of the scene because we think we know what's going on. We think he is a serial killer and she is a victim who is being groomed. And we are enjoying what we think is the irony when she asks him, "Are you a serial killer?" We come circling back around to that first line, right? And a little laugh goes up through the audience because we're like, yes, he is. And in fact, she says, "You need to look me in the eye and tell me you're not a serial killer." And he looks her in the eye and he tells her he is not a serial killer. And another little giggle goes up through the audience because we are telling ourselves, oh, honey, he is. But what's really interesting, just like if you listen to my podcast on Barbie, dropping us into Ken's perspective and through Ken experiencing what the patriarchy feels like, the writer, J.T. Mollner, is actually doing the same technique here because her next lines are the most important ones. And I'm going to paraphrase here. But basically what she says is, you don't know how scary it is being a woman. You don't have to ask these questions because you're a guy. You don't have to wonder every time you want to have a little fun. Am I going to get murdered tonight? And of course, what's interesting is neither he nor we ever think to ask the same question to her. Because like him, we are blinded by our own preconceptions about who is who and what role who must be playing. So again, this movie comes out of order. We're constantly being knocked off guard. We think we're watching one ironic thing, but actually the joke is on us because it's not him that's grooming her. It's her that's grooming him. It's not him that is seducing her into danger. It's she who is seducing him into danger. But we don't know that yet. Instead, we're going to find ourselves in the hotel room back at that image we started with of him choking her. And then we get this surprise when she tells him to do it harder. And we start to realize she's role-playing. She's role-playing. And then there's a moment where he turns on her. And suddenly it gets really, really real as he threatens to cut her, to splay her open, and tells her, I'm in charge now. And suddenly it's terrifying. And we're like, yes, we're putting the pieces together as the audience. Now, here's what's interesting. The characters are not the ones who are in suspense. We are the ones whose perceptions are being knocked about. And our perceptions as the audience in the secondary structure is being knocked about because there's stuff we don't know. It's not because the writer's doing exposition. It's because he's not doing exposition that all this feels so compelling. So we are dropped in, we see him turn and we go, oh, the light bulb goes off. A new story. She played the game with the wrong guy. And a new level of irony occurs. But then we cut back and we're in the past in the car and she is telling him to do this. That in fact, this is part of the role play. And in fact, she tells him, what does no mean? Yes. So we actually end up learning that this is her game, not his. Right? And suddenly we're laughing and we're feeling relief again. But we don't know what's happening. We don't know how he went from being this nice and oddly compliant guy and her being this girl with these really strange fantasies to this horrific chase. In fact, we may even be asking ourselves, is this part of her game? Is all this horror that we've been seeing part of her game? But she's been shot. Her ear has been cut off, or her ear has been lost. There's a dead Doomsdayer on the floor, right? We've seen a bunch of images in other time periods that tell us that this, whatever this game is, has gotten out of control. So we're trying to piece it together as an audience, right? This is all secondary structure. From a primary perspective, all this played out linearly for the characters. From a primary structure perspective, it started, he met a girl, she wanted to get laid, she asked him if he was a serial killer, she shared a really weird fantasy, he went along with it, right? That's his experience so far. It's only us who's being surprised. As the piece develops, she offers him cocaine. The cocaine ends up being not cocaine, but ketamine. And having incapacitated him in this way, she reveals herself to be the serial killer, the electric lady, and starts carving him up, carving her initials into his chest and beginning the process by which she is going to murder him. So you can see that once again, neither we nor the character saw it coming, right? In this way, primary structure and secondary structure are matching up. We and the character put it together, what's actually happening to him at the same time. Now, these games are going to continue. We are going to continue to be knocked about and surprised in our experience of the structure. And I'm not going to break down every single element of how that's built, but I am going to come back to that little speech she gave in the car. Because it's that little speech that actually gives the piece its meaning. It's that little speech that helps us understand, because we're never really going to understand her motivations. At the very end, she's going to say to a cop before she murders him, "Why do you do it?" "Well, because sometimes I don't see people, I see demons." Right? In other words, she is a victim of the same lack of vision, lack of actually seeing what's in front of her that we are, right? Seeing a cliche, seeing a stereotype, instead of seeing the specificity, instead of seeing what's actually happening. So we're going to get that piece at the very end. But the real clue to what's going on for her is at the very beginning, which is that she is flipping her fear as a woman onto the men, right? That just like Ken discovers what it feels like to be a victim of the patriarchy, the demon, who's actually a nice guy, ends up discovering what it feels like to live in that fear of the demons around her. What it feels like to live in the fear that just wanting a good time is going to lead to getting yourself murdered. And in this way, you can see that J.T. Mollner is playing exactly the same structural game as Barbie. He's actually just doing the Barbie thing with the serial killer movie. What does it feel like for Ken when suddenly he experiences what it feels like to be the final lady? So we're doing this wonderful gender flip that says something about our world. And where does it all come from? It doesn't come from J.T. Mollner having a master plan of knowing exactly what he's building. It comes from J.T. Mollner paying attention to his own primary structure, the primary structure of his journey as a writer. All he has is the bandage. But the bandage is that first little clue, just like the butter is the clue that these older people are the doomsdayers. That bandage is the first little clue that maybe she is not who we think she is. We get a lot of other clues that we ignore. As he's being chasing her through the woods, we get this image of her tearing off the bandage and then splashing it with vodka. And we're like, what is she doing? We get a moment where the elderly couple offer to call the cops and she says, no cops. We have these weird things, but it takes us, because of our own stereotypes, all this time to put it together. And what I'd like to suggest to you is that that is actually the same process you're going through in your subconscious mind as you write your script. That actually the cliches and the tropes and the plot plans that you have are not the gift to your script. They are actually the obstacle to writing your true story, right? Because they are not developed by something in you. They are superimposed by the stereotypes that you've developed by watching other movies. And that the beautiful process of writing a script, focusing on your own primary structure, what am I discovering as a screenwriter? And the primary structure of your characters, what do they want? What choices are they making? What makes it hard? Stepping into that journey, right? And that slightly chaotic experience, because just like Strange Darling, your subconscious mind isn't always going to feed you your script in linear order, but rather by simply forcing yourself to really see what you are looking at, you can discover the movie that lies underneath the movie that you're planning. And without a doubt, both the primary and the secondary structure of that movie are going to be more interesting, more compelling, and more powerful both for you and your audience than anything you could have planned. I hope this podcast is helping your writing. If it is, please remember to give us a 5-star review wherever you are watching or listening, to share with your friends. We need your help to get the word out there. And if you want to learn more about how to build primary and secondary structure in your own screenwriting, you can start with us, with our Write Your Screenplay class, where you will learn in 4 weeks the foundations of how to build a 7-act structure for your own script.